Hello and welcome to the Daily Deal with Benjamin Frazier. I am Ben. Today my guest is a reporter and professor with 20 years experience in broadcast journalism all over the country. We're going to learn a little bit more about her and a lot about the state of media today. Hello, Ms. Douglas.
How are you?
Well, let's get right into it.
Absolutely.
Let's start with your background. How did you begin and where have you been before getting here?
Absolutely. I think I began in high school. I started at that point working or volunteering like for the yearbook and the school newspaper and stuff like that. Eventually, let's fast forward because it could take forever here. Started my actual career in Kennewick, Washington.
Okay.
For
So is that where you went to high school? So you just naturally went to the nearest station, or?
No, and that's a really good question because back then we didn't have the internet and all those sources for looking for jobs.
Yeah.
So basically there was a book with all of the TV stations across the country. And I had graduated from college and I was like, all right, my parents want me to get a job. And so started looking through that book and just every small station, because back then the idea was to go to a small station, make all your mistakes, learn the business from the bottom up, and then try to move up. Nowadays, a lot of times reporters get lucky breaks and they get to be in larger markets than Kennewick. But back then it was pretty much part of going up the ladder that you start small and then try to go big. So Kennewick, Washington, that's where I started out.
Okay, so you always knew you wanted to be a reporter, or was it just something you felt inspired to do by working in the yearbook?
I think a combination of both of those.
Okay.
Kind of felt right, and then working on the yearbook and all that kind of stuff. And so once I graduated, felt natural.
All right, okay. Next, I guess I want to ask, what goes into being a field reporter? With your, what's the daily routine and how does it affect your life? It's not a common job, but you can get into a routine in anything. So how does that work for you?
Absolutely, not a common job at all. And I think we, as reporters, even though I'm not still in the reporting business, I still feel like a reporter always, because you're just always investigating something in life. But so much. I mean, outside of just having your bachelor's, you just have to have a natural curiosity. You have to like people. You have to, really just be passionate about it.
Okay.
And I think those are some of the key things in terms of getting in. And then doing an internship is always a really good way to just get a connection.
Yeah.
And let people see what you can do, and then kind of go from there.
Okay. Now, how would you say the job has changed? Like you said, you began when internet wasn't so big, widely used by everyone. So how's it really changed and progressed through the years?
A whole lot. I mean, back then, when I was in Kennewick, to begin with, I was a one-man band, which if anybody gets an opportunity who wants to be a reporter to be a one-man band, it's great because you actually get to do a little bit of everything. You get to write, you get to report, you get to actually shoot your work. So keep that in mind for anybody who's moving in that way.
Okay.
But the internet has just made it a lot faster, and the internet has made the job multifaceted. Instead of just reporting, now you're posting to the web, and now you're really multi-platforming it, as they say. Okay. Whereas back then, it was just a matter of making sure you had your story ready and making sure you could make deadline to get on TV. Now you're tweeting and posting.
So you would say that reporters need a social media presence now?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I don't think I see a reporter out there without a social media presence.
All right. So would you encourage your studio, anyone you were working for, to invest more into new media as opposed to old media?
You mean if a station I would be working for, or somebody who's getting into the business?
Would you want them to invest more in the old version, your basic studio setup, going out and being a field journalist? Or would you say you would have them invest more in building a social media background, having a presence online so that that's easily accessible?
Really good question. I'm very old school, and I think that good stories are what drives the newsroom. And so even though I see social media and I get it and I understand that it's the wave of the future, I would like to see news organizations kind of step back a little bit and refocus on taking the time to build good stories, research them, and so forth. And yeah, as opposed to just, gunning it. We got to get this on social media. We have to get this on TV and that combination. So I don't know. I'm a little old school.
Okay, so how do you feel about events like the Boston bombings, where social media blew up, at poor choice of words there, but it essentially everyone was online and posting, and a site like Reddit even posted that they had singled out people in the crowd and said that they had found the people who had set off the bombs, and they were obviously wrong. The FBI later found the real people, but how do you feel about social media and the responsibility that comes with it when you're reporting as a network?
That's the problem, because people are driving social media and information is sort of coming unfiltered from everywhere, whereas when you're in a news organization, there's a bit of a pause. Let's research this. Let's kind of see, let's make phone calls and so forth. While social media, I think, is excellent because it gives people information immediately, at the same time, we run into problems like that with the Boston issue and so forth, that we can see mistakes. Whereas with a traditional news organization, there's a bit more time and people are trained in the medium and they can research and kind of, yeah.
So it's on the news networks themselves to still do that filter, even though they want to print as fast as social media, go to print as it were, they still have to be that filter to fact check and get sources.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So how do you see global reporting as opposed to domestic reporting? It's obviously different situations, different governments, different sort of styles of reporting. So how do you see that as opposed to domestic?
I was in Argentina last year, and this year, not too long ago, went to Dominican Republic. And you know what, I think I just chalk it up when I look at the way, and I think this is what you mean, when I just look at the way news is reported, I kind of think of it more so as whatever style those different countries and so forth decide to adopt. I think here in the US, what we mostly do is we want everything quick, because the major difference that I noticed with their newscasts, everything was a lot longer and more, not necessarily more detailed, but they spent a lot more time on stories, whereas most of our stories are quick. Because I think, for the most part, we think people want everything quick and concise.
Yeah.
So just in style, I
Okay.
think I see it differently.
Okay. And how do you feel about countries where media is monitored by the government? Well, like, say, China keeps a close eye on its media, has a very strong hold on how it goes out, how people see it. How do you feel about countries that sort of, I wouldn't say suppress, but control how the media goes out to the people?
The First Amendment for us is there for a reason, to give us freedom of the press, and I think that that's the method that works best here. And I think any other format, I don't know if people would so much take a liking to it, because they're looking to the media to, at least to some degree, provide information objectively and to provide as much as we can get as reporters and so forth. So in terms of the government having their arm and their hand and being, the big brother in it, I think you would find a lot of objections to that.
Okay. Now, what news networks or programs would you say have the most provocative, most interesting investigative journalism these days?
I think, let me see. I think CNN still does a really good job. This is kind of a little bit different, but I think TMZ also does a really good job, because I know you look kind of
they are an unorthodox type of program.
Yeah, but they definitely, they're on top of the story. I mean, sometimes they kind of have to pull back because of their paparazzi style and I don't know if you noticed with the Bobby Christina story that they were at the forefront of it, but then I think because they were getting some of the information not totally right, that they kind of pulled back. But I think they're pretty
More
interesting.
More times than not, they'll have a story and have it factually backed up.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
That's interesting. So I was expecting something like Vice or something.
CNN, TMZ. I love to watch the local channels because the reporters tend to still have the old school style of, you know, let's be good journalists and so forth. So.
Do you still look up to reporters?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. A
Who
lot
are
of
your
the.
favorites?
I like Will Thomas on Channel 5.
Okay.
I like.
What about him would you say you like?
Just because he's very active in his reporting, very forthright. There are a lot of people that I think are just really good journalists locally. I'm trying to think of some additional names as we're chatting
Jim
here.
Vance is my favorite.
Okay.
Mostly I like Jim Vance from NBC4 because he's the one I grew up watching and my father grew up watching. So he's a household name.
Right. Right, and credible and somebody you can trust and things along that line. I agree with you.
And now, with the integrity of the journalists themselves, I have to come to stories like Brian Williams and the Fox News host, Bill O'Reilly.
Right, right.
How do you feel about what's the responsibility? Where is the difference between the reporter who reports the story to the network and the network's responsibility to fact check that reporter?
In a traditional newsroom, there's the news director who's kind of the layer before you get to the network and the network executives. So in the Brian Williams example, I would assume that there was a news director somewhere there before you get to all the execs, because the execs are doing what the execs do in terms of keeping things going, the budgets and so forth. And I mean, ultimately, I think it falls upon the reporter to be mindful of what that person is doing and so forth, because all the trust is in you as you go out there and you're making your phone calls and so forth. And then, of course, the news director, I think, if there's some question to be made as that this doesn't make sense or whatever the case is, or where did this come from, then that's the second layer before you get to those guys up there.
All right. So, what networks are you interested in now? What networks do you think are doing the best reporting for you right now that you would go to for your news?
Again, I go to CNN. I go to the locals mostly. I look at like the Washington Post. Let me see who else, if there are any obscure type. I do a lot of just surfing around and seeing and comparing stories a lot of times. I'll look at like Yahoo to see what they said compared with this other outlet and things like that. It just really depends. But I definitely do my daily
daily collection.
Yeah, to see what's going on. And I like to compare too.
Okay.
Because it just makes a difference, I think, in how you consume the news.
Okay. And finally, what do you hope new journalists knew going into the field?
I hope they know it's hard. It's not easy. Because I think most of the times people have a sense that it's super easy because it kind of looks glamorous, but there's nothing easy about it. And it's a lot of work, a lot of long hours.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you for stopping by, first off. And I'd like to thank you all for sitting in with us here on The Daily Deal. I'm Benjamin Frazier, and as always, deal with it.